Welcome to another Rabble Rants Live. It's Friday, and we are here to unpack the news items that have us most pissed off this week. And maybe that's not a healthy thing to do. We also try to provide solutions, and at the end, we always give updates as to the work the grassroots is doing to upend all of this nonsense that we'll cover. This week, I am joined by two guests. We have Joe and Chris. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They can share what they want to share. Let's go to Chris first. Chris, welcome to Rabble Rants.
Thanks very much. My name's Chris Markevich. I am the Green Party of Canada's official critic for mental health and addictions, and I'm also the candidate here in Courtenay, Alberni on Vancouver Island, and also a longtime activist and rabble rouser like yourselves.
Joe, tell everyone about yourself.
Yes, hi. I'm Joe, also known commonly as Joe Morin 73. I'm half of the podcast that usually goes, which is the Dina and Joe Live, and as well as just a very active member around the Ottawa area in regards to activism, both for Palestinian and direct defense is background.
We're getting good representation regionally this time. Usually the show can be a little Ontario-centric, so feel free to add in local perspective, folks, because, yeah, we don't often get such a well-rounded guest lineup. But I'll just let you know what we're going to talk about today in general, but who knows what tangents will go on, right? It's going to be mostly based around Canadian politics. That's what we do. Obviously, everyone's talking about Justin Trudeau resigning as Liberal leader and proroguing the government. What does that mean for Canadian politics? The NDP, we've got a Green Party candidate here, so it's going to get interesting. So we'll unpack that. And we can't not talk about Trump. We try not to talk too much about Trump, let other people cover U.S. politics, but he's talking about Canada as the 51st state. We're not going to ignore it. I don't know how seriously we're going to take it, but we're definitely going to talk about it. We also have some things that the Liberals managed to get done that'll get you really upset before they are probably out the door. Loblaws got caught again, so we're going to rant about that. And Meta, or Facebook, because my mother, she had no idea what Meta was. So Facebook and Instagram, for all the, I don't know what generation that is, but they are ending fact-checking. I guess they were pretending they were doing fact-checking to begin with, but either way, we'll kind of touch on that. And like I said, at the end, we have updates from previous guests of Blueprints of Disruption, which is a podcast that's completely dedicated to amplifying the grassroots. So if you have anybody that we have not had on the show yet that is doing good grassroots work, be sure to have them reach out to us. So let's get started, though. Let's start ranting. Let's vent. It's Friday. Let's get it out. It's been a while since we've heard the news. I mean, news travels so fast. But it has been a while. Chris has an update for us in the last hour that I don't have in my notes. But Justin Trudeau, in case you weren't paying attention, he resigned. He's not going to be the Liberal leader, and he will not be Prime Minister for very long. He also prorogued Parliament. For those who don't know what that means, he's gone to the Governor General and said, please, 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 will you shut down Parliament so that I can just, my party can get on with it, hold a leadership race, and then we will hit the ground running in the end of March. March 25th, I think, is that the date? March 25th. So that'll be 3 months into Trump's presidency, although he seems to have already started. We'll get to that, but was anybody surprised? Let's canvass the room. I don't think anyone was surprised, but I mean, you want to out yourself as not seeing this is coming after Chrystia Freeland. She had her own little rant.
I think I can't speak for Chris, but for myself, yeah, I'm not surprised that sort of the events as they occurred. I do want to talk about the proroguement because it's not uncommon. It's quite standard that it occurs. And the only thing I want to talk about that is the reaction to the fact that proroguement occurred, even though it's standard. And I've just been watching so much pushback and saying, like, I can't believe they're proroguing it. Like the same thing they always do. Like this is just common. Sorry, Chris.
I guess like the timing too, folks. But before Chris goes, sorry, because like I'll forget. I know I will.
Mhm.
The same, we have trouble staying on narrative sometimes, right? We're like, most of us would agree that the governor general is kind of like an obsolete position, especially anti-monarchist. We're just like, what's up with that? But whenever it suits folks, they'll all of a sudden be calling on the governor general to be that savior, to come in and say, no, I'm not going to prorogue, I'm going to overrule your elected prime minister. And it's just like another one of these kind of opportunist narratives that they would grasp at no matter which side they're on the coin, right? No, so it's, I thought that was funny to see leftists out there thinking that would have been something they could hold on to, is the Queen's representative or the King's representative.
It's an old habit, hard to break.
Chris, like that means a lot for your neck of the woods as well. I mean, being a candidate, what did you think?
Well, I definitely wasn't surprised. And as Joe mentioned, we've seen it before. Harper did it in 2008, also with a minority government. So proroguing is, yeah, as he said, it's standard practice when a party leader, especially the prime minister, resigns. They obviously want to keep the government functioning. They obviously want to stay in power. So that's the way they do it. Now, with respect to what has just recently come out, Trudeau made a last-ditch effort to appeal to the opposition parties before stepping down to keep the government going until the leadership race was completed and after the parliament had come back, and all opposition parties said no. They said they have maintained that they're going to bring the government down at the first opportunity. Now, I've actually already met with the Green Party caucus and we talked to the legislative folks there. And basically, as far as timeline goes, the soonest a non-confidence vote can take place is March 26th, which is 2 days after the House comes back. So that's essentially the time that we're looking at, is around the 26th or the 27th is when the government will likely fall. Then at that point, whoever is the elected leader and the appointed prime minister from the leadership race has to go to the governor general and dissolve parliament and call an election. So we're likely going to be in a campaign the first week of April. As far as timelines on that are concerned, it's about 5.5 weeks for the election time. So I would say the first week of May is likely when election day is going to be. Now, when it comes,
great time to campaign.
Great time to campaign. Well, yeah, I mean, we basically know it's going to happen now. So all the planning is now underway. As a matter of fact, we have some stuff coming up probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, I can't tell you what it is yet, but big things are coming. We've already been preparing for this for quite some time because a minority situation, the government can fall at any time. And obviously the Conservatives have been threatening for months that they're going to bring down the government and have introduced multiple non-confidence motions, which the opposition parties have said, no, thanks. We're not going to let you dictate the terms of bringing down the government. But that's another conversation. But yeah, effectively, it's going to happen, and we're doing everything we can to prepare for it.
There's not an agreement even amongst the NDP base on whether or not they want Jagmeet to actually go along with that no confidence vote. Right? It's not just the Conservatives that are needed to bring down the Liberals. I mean, mind you, at this point, I think the Liberals have brought themselves down. But, you got Charlie Angus out there. I just want to mention he is openly contradicting the party and splitting from leadership and saying he is not going to vote to bring down the government right now because he sees that as guaranteeing a Poilievre win, and he's not here for that. It's like the same fence we're always stuck on. We don't like Trudeau. We definitely don't like the Conservatives, but does anybody think an election right now is a good, not right now, we're talking about perhaps May, but I guess perhaps at that point we're actually almost due for an election, right? It would have been just a few months. It's really October, just a few months early at that point.
Yeah, October was the constitutionally, mandated election period, and that's election day. The campaign would have started at the end of September, so yeah. That's 6 months max.
Yeah.
of separation. Now, traditionally, the parties love to do their summer tours, where they go and campaign and they have a big event and they take lots of
Lots of
photo ops.
volunteers.
Oh, lots of volunteers, like everything, like the whole, dog and pony show, right? But we're not going to get that this time. It's going to be a completely rushed affair, from start to finish. And that also goes with the Liberal leadership campaign as well, which we'll obviously get to. But there's some interesting things that just came out about the Liberal leadership race as well, which furthers the narrative that the election is coming sooner rather than later.
Oh, okay. Like, if you want to share that, because I'm assuming you're talking about, and I forgot to put this in my notes because it did piss me off. We're talking about the Liberal leadership race, and if folks remember the last time, all of Canada got to vote for the Liberal leader. They all picked JT, and my guess is they were planning, they're going to do the same thing. But not now that we can talk about foreign interference and migrants as the scapegoats for absolutely everything. So in apparently today's political climate, that's unacceptable. And rather than look to the Liberal Party to change it, folks are really just kind of coming up with all of these reasons why specifically new Canadians, or maybe they don't have their status yet, but temporary Canadians, not landed immigrants, shouldn't be able to vote in the Liberal leadership race. They're talking about going the opposite way of really, because they opened it up. I mean, other parties are also opening it up in terms of age. A lot of them have taken votes to lower the voting age within parties that's lower than the age at the actual ballot box, just to get more people participating in politics. But now, as we see the Liberal Party shifting to the right with Freeland and, I would argue Carney, and maybe all of them, maybe there's a few exceptions there, but it seems as though even their internal procedures are kind of going the opposite way than they had intended maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Coming from the NDP, I know there's a lot of efforts to open up voting within that party. What do y'all folks think about the claims of foreign interference in picking the new Liberal leader? Do you think that has a lot of merit? Do you think folks are actually interested in choosing that position from abroad? It makes a big difference in the end?
Well, I mean, we are aware that there is information, and there is information that's going to be coming out in regards to that foreign interference having occurred in the Conservative Party. To not think that there's a potential in the Liberal leadership, it'd be a little naive for us to think that. Although I don't think, based on past history in regards to our previous elections, generally the party that's kind of lost their leader generally doesn't get reelected. Chrétien, Paul Martin was kind of the exception, but even still, that was a very small exception. It didn't last very long.
May is a long way away, though, eh, Joe?
Sorry?
When Chris laid out that time frame,
Yep.
May seems a long way away. It's
Absolutely.
that anything can happen.
Oh, absolutely. Anything can happen. One of the other content creators that I've talked to quite a bit as well, he pointed out recently that in the 2011 election, everybody was viewing the statistics in regards to how the outcome was going to occur. It was only around the last week that the NTP had a massive uptick from Jack Layton that swept Quebec, and nobody predicted that. So to say what's occurring today is what we're going to see at the ballot box, no, between now and May, there's a huge time difference of things that could occur. And it's so I'm not convinced that we're going to see that particular thing. But in regards to the original question, which is about the foreign interference, I don't think they're going to be looking at. I think it's potential. I don't know if what they're proposing is based on that, or they're just scapegoating with that in regards to their shift to the right.
It could be both.
Oh yeah,
it could be. It's always a convenient scapegoat, but I think you said when you mentioned the Conservatives, and we've done a lot of documentation from inside the NDP, like none of those procedures, even if you open them up to everybody, are democratic, like at all.
Mm.
Very few procedures within internal party politics are, truly democratic in the way that you would envision them, or hope for them. And yeah, I just think there's larger problems. I think someone summed it up best in a tweet this week, and I don't know who to give credit for. It was like, I just want to congratulate the next winner of the Canadian election. It's like the CEOs of Loblaws and all of our usual suspects. And no matter who wins, we know that they're going to cozy up to them quite quickly. So, yeah, it's not just a leadership race that we might be looking at for the Liberals, but a race for their existence. I know in Ontario they've been decimated. The last polls that I saw, I don't even know if I hate polls. I always slam them, but then now I find myself like really paying attention to them. With Liberals only getting 1 seat in Ontario, and I thought that's just can't be possible, but it's a different ball game. And now even the NDP, we're not even guaranteed to go into that election with Jagmeet. Folks want to I mean, I complain about Jagmeet a lot. People have probably heard me. Does anybody have an opinion on, even if you could take your candidate hat off, Chris, like pretend you're an NDP, or what should they be doing? Should they be looking for a new leader? Like, I would guess you would want him to go in with Jagmeet because he's not very popular right now.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly get back to what you were talking about with the Liberal leadership race, and just add that they've also increased the fee for entry into the leadership from 75,000 to 350,000.
Holy shit!
And prospective candidates only have until January 23rd to submit all of their paperwork and the entry fee.
Okay, Jesus. Freeland and Carney,
Freeland, I know that Carney, and Christy Clark. I think those are the only 3 that are probably going to be there at the end of the day. Yeah.
As an individual, I mean, this is going to be hard to
yeah.
There is
nearly impossible for most candidates who've declared to come up with that kind of money that fast. They have 13 days.
They have been plotting this for months, though. Like, they have probably been fundraising unofficially for this for months. Like, Freeland.
Well, yeah, Christy Clark has been all over social media and traveling all across Canada, meeting with lots of high-profile Liberals over the last probably 2 or 3 months. She probably knew in advance that this was coming as well, because she's a campaigner. Like, obviously, the numbers in terms of popularity for leadership candidates right now, she's near the bottom, but I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up being one of the front runners at the end.
Yeah, you just don't know what dirt is going to be dug up and how the public's going to feel about it all. And, if we all have a say in it, who knows who I'll pick? I'm not, I don't think it'll be picking the next prime minister, but, maybe I'll be wrong. Jagmeet thinks it's going to be him, though. Is it going to be Jagmeet? That's how he campaigns, no matter what writing is on the wall. That's the message.
And to a certain extent, and this includes every political leader, they kind of have to, especially when you consider Quebec. Every party has a national platform, and every national platform has to include a section for Quebec, just for Quebec. Particularly the NDP, as they have the Sherbrooke Declaration. But if you don't come up with a national platform and a plan to address all of the issues that are important to Canadians, in particular the relationship with Quebec, you'll never get any votes there, ever. So that's part and parcel with the plan to run for prime minister, as it was, right? But in terms of how the NDP are going to do, I don't expect there will be that much change in the overall seat count. It's going to be the distribution that I think will be the biggest shift. I can see them winning more seats in Manitoba, where Wab Kinew is really popular. In fact, he's one of the most popular.
You're talking the NDP, premiers. Yeah.
NDP,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's the most popular premier, I think, in Canada right now. And then they may make some gains in Alberta as well, surprisingly enough, because the NDP is polling well there. But other than that, it's going to shift, especially in Ontario and BC. They're doing really poorly. In the metro areas, they're still in the dogfights. But here on Vancouver Island, they're basically being projected to be swept completely out. They won't have a single seat left on Vancouver Island once all is said and done. So the shifts notwithstanding, I don't think much is going to change, and I think that will be the final nail in the coffin for Jagmeet Singh's leadership. Members are really, really pissed, and they're exhausted with how things have been going and all the promises that have been made since 2011, since 2015. People are still talking about the good old days, quote unquote, with Jack Layton as leader. There's still a lot of centralization in their power structure, as you've talked about many times and we've talked about many times. So they're looking for a change. Like, it's a change election in many ways, more than one. There's lots of stuff, coming, to the fore in terms of where voters' priorities are, and the political parties in, writ large are just not addressing those issues. They're talking about things that really people don't care about, right? And if you don't address real concerns and real needs of everyday people, you're not going to get those votes. It doesn't matter how pretty you dress it up. It doesn't matter how charismatic your leader might be. If you don't address people's issues, they're not going to vote for you, and they're not going to support you if they think that you're just paying them lip service, which I think, all political parties, but especially NDP, have been doing for a very, very long time, especially with their base.
I know I'd put this later in the agenda, but I wanted to talk about it because it's pertinent now. The Liberals, on their way out, and really this whole year, they have been focused on the Conservatives' main talking point, which is immigrants. And they tightened the rules around international students. They lowered the numbers for migrants available. They are going to allow many visas to simply just expire, leaving people having to leave the country or to stay undocumented. We're talking like up to 1 million people. And just recently, one of the last things that they did before proroguing Parliament was to increase the fines for deportations. And if you're looking at an escorted deportation, it's almost $13,000. They didn't just increase it, they times it by 10. And so, and this might not matter to a whole lot of people. Some people might be still sitting there thinking the housing problem will be solved if we just lower migrant numbers. But this really was picked up by The Sun and other right-wing media outlets. Hardly anybody else really talked about it. And so that is by design. These are the bread and butter of the conservative talking points, right? Like xenophobia, racism. They try to maybe sometimes pretend that they're going after the big guys, but I don't think even their base really buy that all that much. But they do know they can guarantee that their politicians will go after immigrants. And that really pissed me off to see the Liberals do that. And I think it just fits into the idea that they are shifting their policies to the right in order to capture what they're seeing in the polls. And I would argue that Jagmeet and his team, and we say Jagmeet, and just so folks who maybe don't understand, like, he really doesn't call the shots there at all. He doesn't design his talking points. He didn't come in with a mission or a vision or a plan or anything like that. He just does what the consultants advise them to do. And these are the same consultants that, advise Sobeys and other oil and gas and stuff like that. Like, they're not working class advisors. Anyway, they did the same. They kind of played into the axe the tax narrative. Like, they didn't use the same language, but they still came on like this GST holiday. Like, that was a big solution to people to go after taxes, and that taxes were somehow unfair to them. And it just kind of played into the narrative. I know there's a difference between a GST holiday and progressive and regressive taxes, but most people don't. Most people just say, yeah, taxes is bad. Even the NDP says taxes are bad. And, they had not shit to say about the CUPW workers either. So they just didn't want to wade into that when it was not cool to do so. And, I think the whole, you say a change election, but I think we've seen the Overton window really shift since the last election. I couldn't even tell you what immigration is probably going to be like one of the key talking points, even though it's not the most important. And I'm scared to see what else gets on the agenda. But surely they're going to be talking about Trump and reacting to U.S. policy at some point if we get what we're being promised. So let's transition a little bit into our next topic, which is Trump is talking like an imperialist. I mean, the U.S. are imperialists. I think I got a kick out of Maxime Bernier's tweet this week where he was, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. I thought Trump was a really good guy. It was such a peaceful term. And, the Democrats are such pieces of shit. Republicans were starting to look really cheery. And then he goes and does this and starts talking about my Canada like this. And, I don't know if he actually means that, like he actually thought that. But Trump isn't letting it go. Like this 51st state. And he's also talking about annexing Greenland and Panama. When asked about Greenland, I mean, he's straight-faced. He's not joking. What he's capable of doing is something we can definitely discuss here. But he's talking about it being needed for national security. And when he says national security, he realizes we don't give a shit about that line anymore. And so then he goes back to the old trope that he's protecting the free world. I thought it was a long time since they've gotten away with using that, like world police, literally, like out loud and not expect to be mocked. But no, he's trying to roll with this. He's going to protect the free world by taking Greenland from Denmark. Also, Panama has the canal. We're going there again, apparently. I'm going to open up to you folks. I've been talking for a lot. I need a sip of water. But, what do y'all think about this? Do we take it seriously or not? Joe, you've been quiet for a little bit.
Yeah, well, just before we get into the Trump thing, I just wanted to go back about just a quick note of the Overton window. It has slid, and I wanted to point out the fact that the slide in regards, especially the immigration thing, was very, very short. I remember as I was doing research in regards to things going on, we were dealing with, I think around the summer last year, with Canada First protests that were starting to become really aggressive. We saw them going around in Toronto malls. We saw them doing their little marches around Ottawa. And these weren't large marches. Like we've seen large marches. They weren't large, but somehow we went from those marches from a sort of what I call it, some people call the fringe or the smaller groups of extreme right wing, to including also Hamilton, who also had that from a Nazi group doing the deport immigrants. To suddenly now we've got not only the conservatives doing this talking point, but also the liberals. Like, how did we get from that to here so fast? Which was weird. But back to our next topic now being Trump. I was worried about him actually trying to invade Canada the first time he got voted in.
Really?
I had it. Yeah, I was. For some reason in the back of my head, I was like, this guy just seems like, yeah, he just might. Like especially up to that point, I always had a certain confidence in regards to the U.S. presence where certain things were kind of expected. Like, are they going to invade Canada? No. We might have some deals, discussions, and maybe a trade war. Like that's the most aggressive thing. But he was the first one coming in there that I legitimately thought, no, I think he might. I don't think he's got everything contained in him. I don't think he's got all the checks and balances in his head.
So here's where I see things in terms of Trump. Now, obviously, his rhetoric is dangerous, and we need to call it out for what it is. And thankfully, most of our political leaders have already done so. Elizabeth May put out a long statement. She was actually on CPAC talking about it for quite a long time. Jagmeet Singh put out a statement. Justin Trudeau put out a statement. Yeah, we can talk about how funny the statements are afterwards. But the point is, even Pierre Poilievre said, Canada's not going to be the 51st state. But the point is that all of this is distracting us from what their agenda really is. Let's not forget Project 2025. Okay. That is the real agenda. That is what they have been projecting and planning for almost a decade, at least that we know of. that has been the go-to agenda for many years. That is what they're going to focus on, and all of this is just to distract us from that. The other part of the distraction is his indictments. It just came out, actually, I think last night or this morning, that he managed to avoid being pulled into court. I don't know the specifics about it. I just remember seeing a headline about it. But that is another big issue for not just Republicans, but for Trump personally. And all of this bluster is just to make us mad about this while they carry out their actual agenda. So let's not lose focus on what's really at stake here. Obviously, like I said, the rhetoric is dangerous. We always have to call out whenever, not just Canada's sovereignty is threatened, but multiple other countries that are within striking distance. But yeah, the real battle is going to take place, in the municipal state legislatures, the district courts, the Supreme Court. All of those fights are what's going to be really important. So let's make sure that we don't lose focus of that.
I want to go back to the Canadian perspective too. When we hear our politicians responding, which is, great. They're all sort of on the same page for once. But what I am seeing is that I don't appreciate, which we often revert to, is nationalism. We're going back, no, not our Canada. Our Canada's awesome, and this is why we're great. And now we're delineating ourselves from Americans again. We've got our great healthcare, and that's now all of a sudden we don't know that our healthcare, you can't get a fucking appointment, and that your friends are at the ER for 22 hours with no answers. We go back into that lull.
So we're not them kind of
at
argument.
Least that is common in capitalism, right? That's what the subproletariat is there for, to be well, okay, I'm bad. I'm not even middle class, but I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I'm not without shelter, and that example class. But the nationalism spouting out of our leaders is just gross and really just feeds into Poilievre's entire shtick. He's in all his glory being able to stand there and be I wouldn't let that happen. But at the same time, he's saying the way to avoid that is to entrench ourselves with American businesses even more. And then you have leftists also talking about protectionism again. So it's kind of forcing narratives upon us that we don't really want. Distractions even here in Canada that even fuck the Liberal leadership. I know we started off talking about it, but I think that's what pissed people off about the proroguing. Yes, it's normal, but it's we aren't getting to what we need to be talking about, right? Namely, Gaza is what comes to mind for most of us, but a huge housing crisis to the point where folks are freezing to death in the capital, and we're not making any gains. We've got the most progressive mayors waging war on encampments and, warming centers across Canada, either closing or not opening when they should. And it's there's shit to deal with. And I know it's
a BC government right now that is planning to open involuntary care starting in March.
And that's your NDP.
That's right. So yeah, your argument is exactly right. We are not holding our leaders to account on the things that actually matter, and are letting all of these distractions take all of the space and all of the air. And people are dying as a result. And it's really tragic, and it's a sad indictment of capitalism. It's a sad indictment of our political systems.
It is. It's the saddest indictment is Joe thinking even, I was worried about Trump the first time around. And I'm really? But then, my mom turned to me in this whole hoopla, and she's really? The same kind of, and I looked at her and I was I was angry. I go, we've been watching a goddamn genocide for a year and no one has done a goddamn thing. Do you think the world is going to come to our aid? I'm sure that's what the people of Gaza thought at some point. You just can't assume anything anymore. And coming from three people who are trying to be political analysis for the moment, it's all malarkey sometimes, because what we knew a year ago is not what we know now. And the levels of fascism that we keep experiencing are getting greater and greater. And you still got people on the sidelines chirping at us going, you're overreacting. This is not what's happening. But It is. It's intense. And, you know, I'd like to laugh it off and think like Trump's just talking about this as a complete distraction. But, you know, at the same time, he is talking about tariffs and using, which is just going to fuck his people even more. But economic force is the words he's using. But this is my favorite line from him. Shout out to Donald Trump for declaring borders artificially drawn lines. Thank you. Thank you very much. All of them are like.
Yeah, haven't we been arguing that for the last like 50 years?
Yes,
at least.
and it's not gained a lot of traction, but now we've got Trump reminding people those aren't real lines. So, you know, for all the leftists out there that are thinking they're going to like entrench themselves in nationalist rhetoric in order to like stave this off or talk back to this, remember it should be an internationalist movement, and these borders are just bullshit to begin with. But that being said, I don't want to be a 51st state. No.
It's also a weird thing for him to say, considering, you know, he built a wall to
well, then that's not arbitrary. That's not arbitrary. That becomes then, I guess, a real border, right? That's what he's doing. He's like, fuck these fake lines. I want a real one. I will just like dig a new trench. You know, a lot of even the continent line. Side note, the continental line between like Europe and Asia is just a racist one. You know, like there's no marker. It's Eurasia. But at some point, like we're just like, no, that's going to be two different places. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. But, you know, like Trump, it's just, I think it's funny also the amount of CEOs and billionaires that are like flocking to him. We get news, like you don't already have him in your pocket. Like it's just.
Well, the thing with Trump is that he doesn't care about anyone except himself, and even the people closest to him know this. So constantly having to cozy up to him is basically a requirement, because he will be on your side one moment and be attacking you the next, and you can never really predict what he's going to do from one moment to the next. So this constant sucking up is just par for the course when it comes to, you know, being close to him. You have to do it, so gross, or he's at some point he's going to turn on you.
It's so gross. They're gonna go kiss the ring, right? Like it's just, even we're gonna talk about Meta later, if we get to it, you know how stuff goes. But they paid $1 million for Trump's inauguration fund. Why is there an inauguration fund? Like, I know they put on a big concert. I know, but like they can't afford that. If you can't, like, I talked about housing first, folks. If you can't afford an inauguration, don't have one, you know, or put that money into housing. God damn it, because yeah, $1 million from Meta, $1 million from who knows who else. Like, I don't want to know how much that costs, but yeah. So like capital is just too drooling. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's other benefits too.
What do you mean?
I can't explicitly say, but I'm sure $1 million goes a long way for Meta.
Oh yeah, and it's that prestige, right? That's like, I was endorsed by Meta, right? I was endorsed by Zuckerberg and Bezos and like all of these really trendy CEOs that have been branded, right? We know them, not like the nameless ones that Luigi goes after.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of, I guess, worked CEOs into the discussion there. I wasn't trying to segue to the next topic, but it just ended up that way. Fucking Loblaws. Grocers in general. So again, I always pick on Loblaws. I think it's just like almost like a swear word. You know what I mean? Like bastards. You say Loblaws. But it's all the grocers. Just
yeah. Well, it's because they're the big game in town in Ontario. That's why.
Yeah. Okay.
They very much are. They bought all the other ones. So.
They did it. Like, some people don't even know. Like, independent grocers, they're not independent. And No Frills, what else? Zayres. Yeah. They own a few, but like I said, it's all the grocers have again been caught ripping us off. So this time it's meat. So here's like the basic rundown. There's a margin of error that's allowable on meat, by the way, like under 500 grams. Apparently, like, no, you gotta be exact on. They have to tell you what you're buying, and you pay that. But apparently over that, there's even a margin of error that they allowed. So you know that they're just banking on the farthest end of that marginal error every time. And like, if you talk about nickel and diming people to death, this is what it looks like. So people can't pay for meat anymore. If anybody is doing grocery shopping, you are just like looking for sale meat. I don't know, maybe I'm unusual in this. I don't think so though, because it's just so expensive, and we find out that the grocers have going beyond this margin of an error, like systematically. So, and it's not even being found out by the people who are tasked with doing this. This is CBC. I mean, they are a national broadcaster, but it's the media. It's the media picking up on all of these videos that people put together of them weighing the meat and then looking at the sticker and being like, what the fuck, Walmart? So it's Walmart, it's Metro, it's Sobeys, it's Loblaws. Loblaws actually apologized for it, so maybe we shouldn't be so hard on them.
Yes, we should.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
But and I mentioned bread fixing, or maybe I didn't, but I'm going to, like I said again, because these folks got caught ripping us off for bread. So bread and meat, they're literally trying to kill us. Okay, like now they're getting into apartments and healthcare, just in case you didn't think that they're trying to kill us. They are. But bread and meat. And so bread fixing, they had to pay $50 million. And that did not deter them for a second. They were like, meh, I make that in a couple minutes, Galen says. He's like, take that off my bonuses for the year. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's just like him, like, writing a check and going, here you go. It's
Yeah,
like that meme.
Couch somewhere.
Yeah, it's like that meme with Trailer Park Boys. I'm going to pay you $100 to fuck off. That's basically it. That is basically Galen Weston in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, he was the first person, I keep mentioning this to anybody who'll listen, right? He was the first person to meet with Doug Ford when he won office. So this man, and that's not going to be unusual in Ontario, this man is calling the shots. Like when you look at U.S. policies, there's a few companies, or corporations rather, that really write a lot of the U.S. policy that you see. I have a feeling Mr. Weston plays a huge role in a lot of the policies that we end up seeing on lots of levels of government, provincial and federal especially, but he's in the development game now too, real estate and all of that. So there's just no end to capital's influence on our politicians. But what do you think we could do to deter these assholes to stop fixing our food prices? I mean, short of nationalizing the food industry. That could be your answer, though. I mean,
yeah, honestly, I don't see many other solutions that don't involve like an actual revolution.
I'm here for that.
We are at the point where we are at the behest of maybe 3 really large corporations in this country, and if we don't push to nationalize these industries, they're just going to keep getting away with it and keep getting away with it. You can protest all you want, and I am totally in favor of protesting, right? Like I participate in protests all the time. I mean, read Palestine, but when it comes right down to who sets the policy, unless you are actively trying to dismantle that system, it's only going to keep, it's like that Ouroboros. It's just going to keep feeding off itself repeatedly over and over. And you have to cut off the head, right? You have to go for the source of the issue. And that's, how entrenched these people are in our political systems, and how much capitalism really depends upon endless growth, which is not sustainable, right? We have to level the playing field, and that involves taking these, huge conglomerates to task and dismantling them and making sure that we redistribute that that production and the food systems that we all depend on. Otherwise, we won't have food left to sustain us. If all of it is being controlled by 1 or 2 or 3 people. And sidebar to this, water is another huge quote unquote commodity. It's necessary for us to live, but 2 or 3 companies, read Nestle, own almost all the water in North America. Look what happened in California the last 2 or 3 days. They ran out of water in the fire hydrants. One family owns nearly all the water in California, in Los Angeles. So unless we address that and actually put ownership of the things that matter to human survival back into the public ownership, we're not going to survive.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I remember a couple of years back looking at a statistic. the world has food for 1.5 times the population of the world. There's enough food to feed everybody and have a bunch extra. And it goes back to the entire idea in regards to grocery stores, which is the demand and pricing is artificial. The entire thing is artificial, and they need to make it artificial. Right down to the point where they will throw out food as opposed to giving it out, because if not, the price will drop. So they will intentionally throw out the food and make sure it's not consumable. Like, this is required. And I've always found it just a weird and disgusting in regards to things like, housing, food, and medical sector, because when we talk about the U.S., and I also get concerned because our health system, people are eyeing it to turn it to privatized. I'm always concerned because capitalism will try to take a necessity to make it profitable at the expense of the people that need it every single time. And like, they will try to maximize a profit off your medical health because somebody needs to make money regardless of the medical help that people need. And
diabetes medication, insulin is a huge market.
Massive.
And the guy who invented it clearly stated, like, I'm giving away this patent because I want people to live. And you can't get diabetes medication in the US, especially without paying like $1,000 a month in some places. And people are rationing it.
Yeah, and proponents of the free market are going to tell you that it's like supply and demand. But all the things that Joe listed off there and that we're talking about, and then some, housing is included, do not operate by supply and demand at all, right? It is all artificial, including the supply end, right? They determine the supply. Also, they can generate the demand, but in the end, you need water, you need housing, you will pay whatever you have to, or then you start making choices, right? If you need your insulin, then maybe you have to go without housing, but you will eventually pay that market price for insulin if you need it, or you will die. But that's an okay consequence with the market rules as they are. So it's capitalism not working for folks. So it's a good example to show people when they start talking about this free market and how it works. But the things that matter the most, it does not. So, revolution is a better answer than just simply nationalizing the food industry. I did like that, Chris. Which is, it's coming from an electoral candidate, though. I mean, that is a separate discussion that me and you and I will have to have, because the episode we're going to drop on Tuesday is with a group out east, and they have started their own political party, but they would kill me if I use that party. So hence the scare quotes. Anyway, you'll have to listen to understand what it is. But I asked them, if you participate in electoralism, are you then feeding into, that system? Like you talked about feeding into capitalism.
The answer is yes. Absolutely it is. I mean, I make no bones about my own aspirations and my own participation in this system, right? You can't say that you're running for office and at the same time say that I'm not participating in the system that subjugates the the people. It does, right? That's by design. That's how it was formed, right? That's why we have property. That's why we have grass.
Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the
That's
spot.
another whole topic, but it would be hypocritical of me to say that I don't participate in that, because I say, viva la revolution,
No. It's a very complex discussion, and it is a very
complex discussion, and that's why I think that the right has done so well in the last 5 to 10 years, is because people are so exasperated and really desperate right now, and having those complex conversations takes time, it takes nuance, and people just don't have the time for that. And that's what they're preying on, right? And they are using punitive measures and cruelty to push forward their agenda. The cruelty is the point. I remember that Medium article that came out several years ago. He wrote a book on it. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but if you look it up, it's an Atlantic article from 2018. And he talks about the first Trump presidency and how the cruelty is the point. Own the libs at any cost. It doesn't matter who dies. It doesn't matter who suffers. It doesn't matter who has to live on the street. It doesn't matter even if we contradict the things that we said 5 minutes ago. As long as we can punish everyone else, we've won.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely right. I'm going to actually switch it up a little bit. We were going to transition into Meta and ending their fact checking. I'm going to shelf that for now, and I'm going to go to one of the comments that we got here on YouTube from Kelly. Have y'all discussed the use of prison inmates to fight the California fires? And I know, like, I'm just springing this on you, but before we started recording, Chris, like, you had something to say about the private prison industrial complex and the trends in provincial politics to start incarcerating drug users, to make it easier for them to jail folks without a home because they're trespassing with their tents on public property. So yeah, California has been not just using prison inmates, but also Mexican firefighters.
Canadian firefighters sent a bomber out of Quebec to
people are using that as a reason, as they're like, no, see,
on the fires.
We're your friends. Don't hurt us. We fight your fires. Yes, we know lots of, Chris, I'm sure you know lots about wildfires and experiencing them. But like, let's focus on what Kelly's talking about here. And this is capitalism finding resources wherever it may. And yeah, for folks maybe who don't know, we've talked about abolitionism here a little bit, but you know, your prison industry in the United States is just a form of slavery re-envisioned. And so it doesn't actually surprise me that they're using inmates to fight the fire. This is what capital does. Either one of you want to comment on that one? I mean, Chris, I know.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I know that there's a lot to unpack just with this comment, right? Prison labor is not a new thing. It has been, a ubiquitous source of labor for America for many, many years. It's the reason why, more people of color are, represented in prison populations than anywhere else. And they imprison more people per capita than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, those are all known facts. We've known that for many years. But using prison inmates to fight fires where they don't have any training or any experience just proves how expendable that they're viewed in American society, and that part and parcel leads to the discussion that you mentioned on incarcerating drug users, incarcerating homeless people. They don't care whether they live or die. If we had implemented policy that would truly take care of everyone that needed help when they needed it, no one would need to die on the street. And, Joe even said it before, we have enough food to feed everyone in the world. We have enough housing to house everyone. We have enough empty space. Think about all the commercial space that has sat empty since COVID. They would rather keep those places empty than put people in them to shelter them. So using prison inmates to fight fires is not surprising. It's disgusting that they would even think of sending people who have no level of training or experience in fighting fires. You're basically you could just drop them into the forest fire from a plane and you'd achieve the same result. You might as well do that, right? Because those wildfires are so dangerous, especially given the conditions that we saw in California. In any case, any firefighter will tell you that, it's a dangerous job. And if you don't have the proper training, the proper support, the proper tools to fight those fires, you're basically walking into a death sentence. So that's what they've committed these people to when it comes to the California fires. They've committed them to a death sentence. Whether they actually live or die doesn't matter to them. And that's scary and it's disgusting. And that's what we're seeing now with involuntary treatment. All the evidence over many years has told us that involuntary care doesn't work. They don't care. All they care about is appeasing people that are upset that the crisis has reached their front doorstep. Whether it's a business, whether it's someone's house, whether it's out in the street on their commute to work, they don't want to see it They want it swept under the rug as quickly as possible, and the consequences be damned. They don't care about those people.
Totally agree. Especially since we're starting to see an increase in the rhetoric. At least, Pierre's been doing that increase in the rhetoric. And to what I'm going to see, particularly in Ontario, I don't know about out in BC or the rest of Canada, but I'm pretty sure it's very close. We're over capacity in the jails as it is. And with 80% of those people right now in the jails haven't even been convicted of crime. They're just being held until until their court. And it's over capacity. Now you've got conservatives coming in there and saying, yeah, you know what? We're just gonna do jail, not bail now. So that overcapacity is now going to massively increase if you start doing that. Aside from the fact that it's a violation of the charter in regards to a whole bunch of issues in regards to freedom, because the presumption is you're innocent until proven guilty. But they don't, again, to steal Chris's line, they don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't care because they could throw them away. They could. It's exactly, I was talking to my friend Dina, and I was saying, like, yeah, the idea of putting you in prison to keep you quiet is to do what the old French torture device, which was called an oubliette. This was just literally a hole where people will be thrown into and forgotten about. Hence the word oubliette. And that's it, where they slowly die off. They may be fed, they may not be fed, they may get water or not, but they're out of the way. Nobody can think about them. Nobody can see them. They're going to be forgotten about. And that's what they're going to be trying to do with this if they try to include more in regards to forced drug rehab. Because let's be honest here, you cannot force somebody with addiction to ever rehabilitate. They all know this. We all know this. This is a waste of money, but they don't care because they made the problem go away. Same thing without a house. They don't care about fixing that. They just want to make it go away. So we'll throw them into the OPA. They'll throw all our problems in there, and then you're not going to see it anymore because we've cleaned it up because we've now just got this overcapacity. We just need more money in this. Oh, we don't have enough funding. We don't have enough prisons. Well, we're going to need to find some way to address this massive crisis we get done in regards to overcapacity. Let's go take a look at privatize because it seems to work well in the U.S. And that's going to be the next conversation coming in. Guaranteed.
Yeah, and look, we'll have the conversation before we need to have the conversation, but that's the old trick, right? You see it with our healthcare. Yeah. We'll make it just so bad. We'll pretend we don't know why it's so bad. It's just beyond, like, the people who've been running it this entire time. We'll just hand it over to the private sector. And
they can fix anything.
They can fix anything, and they can do it at less the cost. And it's like, it's a load of shit.
Anybody waiting on a defund, demonize, privatize?
Oh yeah, I like that.
No, it's defunding. That's a new one.
I can't remember exactly what the saying is, but that's essentially their MO. Is they defund it and then they totally trash it, and then they move to privatize and say, well, government can't solve the problem anymore. We'll just let the private sector take over. And that's exactly what they're doing here too.
If that's not what the strategy is called, I mean, that aptly describes what they do. So defund, demonize, and privatize. It's like, it's not the chant we want to be saying, but it's fitting. It's fitting. We're kind of at our hour mark, so I'm going to move to the updates. Usually they're good updates, but there's one item on my agenda here that we didn't get to. I just want to note here, we talk a lot about the fight for unhoused people and what's facing them in terms of the municipalities, making it just increasingly more difficult for them to survive. The provinces aren't helping either because they're closing safe injection sites and doing all the things that Joe and Chris were just talking about. But in Toronto, I'm talking Toronto right now because that's what I know. Olivia Chow is the mayor there, and for the folks who aren't paying attention or don't need to pay attention to Toronto politics, she was by far the most progressive choice, within reason. We don't have to get into that. Chloe Brown's gonna be so mad I said that, but sorry. Okay, so she had the backing of pretty much every progressive organization, especially the really well-funded ones in the city, and she has been a demon when it comes to encampments. I at the beginning, folks tried to be like, well, she's just the mayor within a system. I mean, but they have been fucking relentless in evicting encampments and sicking police and city workers on them. And now Toronto has just experienced an incredible cold spat, typical of winter, but it is during these times that some of the warming centers weren't even opening because they need a threshold of -15. That's what, like, we all know our shelters are full. They're turning away people on the regular. The warming centers get full, so we have surge centers for those, and those were becoming at capacity, but then they were closing because it wasn't cold enough. Wind chill factor. There's so many things. It was friggin' cold, but it wasn't -15. So folks were left out in the cold. And then in Ottawa, I believe the gentleman's name was Roger. Am I right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I believe that's the name. Yeah, because there's now I read the people left signs and made a place for to honor him there, and it shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't
That's it.
happen. No. And like all really advocates can do right now is, I'm following Kathy Crow and a couple of the other advocates that work specifically in Toronto, and they can just keep people update as to where the open warming centers are, where the possibilities are, because the politicians are not listening at all. And at the same time you're experiencing this massive capacity, they're meeting with community members to assure them that they're going to evict more encampments. And so this is just going to keep mixing up. We shared this before, but I'll share it again. Our second guests ever on the show, Blueprints of Disruption, we're two activists from Lloydminster in Alberta. It's right on the border. And their town had a sweep, so to speak, of right-wing councillors. Not exclusively, but enough that they ended up actually closing the only warming center there for this year. It won't open at all. And that same council actually decreased the amount of people that are allowed. They called for an audit of the only shelter that was there and decreased the amount of people that they would have available. And so they're already getting notices of people passing away. Roger's death is heartbreaking, especially coming in the capital, where it's just dripping with resources and the folks who make the decisions. But this is not unusual. These deaths are going to be very frequent, especially with the tightening of, this is in Toronto. This is a mayor who didn't even sign on to the letter to ask the premier so they could be rougher and tougher on encampments. This is one that's just already doing it. So folks need to get on the phones to their councillors and get them to open up these warming centers at the very least. But again, it just kind of goes back to the housing first initiatives. Like, we pay for a lot of stuff. We put a lot of stuff on. We worry about a lot of things without putting shelter over the head of every one of us. And that's fucked up. I mean, even if you just think hey, at some point we all saw each other, how scarce as we were. We're like, let's get together and make life easier for one another. We're going to make societies, right? I'm not going to live over here and you live over there. That's hard. You don't live without cooperation and communities. And we didn't get 8 people together to leave 2 of them out of the cave, right? That just doesn't make sense. That was the whole purpose, was to take care of one another. So it's enraging to see even the most, like I say, progressive mayor committing this kind of social murder. But I have better updates. Let's go. The best update, I think, is because this week we dropped an interview with a strike captain and a shop steward, mail carrier, Serafina Ember. If you're looking for her on social media, we've linked her in the show notes. But it's a fabulous interview. Very defiant, militant, rank and file perspective on what happened to postal workers during the strike. When you hear how bad the bosses at Canada Post were, you'll be enraged. But at the same time, the workers aren't done, and not just workers, but their allies. So you have rank and file. Shout out to QP3902. I don't know if it's officially, but folks from your union definitely did a lot of the work to put on a hard picket line this week in Toronto. So we're talking about 3 weeks after 55,000 Canadian postal workers were ordered back to work. community members formed 2 hard picket lines to block both entrances at a Toronto sorting distribution facility. And they shut it down for about 30 minutes. And that might not sound like a lot, but it was during a shift change. So even the folks that didn't, that maybe got through with enough complaining or kerfuffle, they were handed a flyer, they were spoken to, and the whole approach was to create the conditions so that workers can say, this is an unsafe work environment, I'm not going to work. I spoke to people who were down at the line, and they say, like, some people were really good. They came upon, they saw what was happening, and they're like, oh no, unsafe work environment, I gotta go home. And they understood the assignment. They're pissed off. They did not want to be ordered back to work. The flyer reminded them too, and that's something that we didn't share in the episode because I didn't know it. Well, we knew it had been a long time since CUPW workers had been without a negotiated contract, so not one by binding arbitration and whatnot. 1994.
Jesus.
1994. I had to do the math over and over. I'm like, 31 years. No, that's not right. I'm like, 2004, 2014, 2024. I'm like, that's 31
it's scary,
years.
Isn't it?
31 years, and that's like supposed to be our strongest union. We're talking about the people who got us mat leave people. They walked for 42 days and ended up getting all of their demands back in 81, which is like, 17 weeks paid at like 92% pay rate. Like, it was incredible what they secured. And that's not even the only thing that they've secured. But yeah, these folks, they're not done. So I know they've been ordered back to work, but the reality is they're still in a legal strike position. They had a 95 or 96% strike mandate voted by the workers. And, the board has ordered them back, but they don't have a deal yet. So between now and we believe it's May, they're going to need some solidarity. So if I ever hear, you can always be following my feed. If I hear about other community lines going up, I encourage folks to bolster them, to still support your postal workers, because it feels like the strike is like you're getting your mail and you're getting your packages, but those folks are still fighting for a deal. So, and they really are fighting. So that community line was nice to see because it came on the day that we dropped the episode. Not related, and I had a lot of locals come in and message me in the DMs just saying, thank you so much for this episode. Did you know we had a community line? Like, they were excited because, like, legally they can't participate in these community lines. They would get reprimanded, but their allies are out there doing it, and it matters. So again, QP 3902, the U of T QP. So it's either 3903 or 3902. I'm getting them mixed up with York University. My apologies. But either way, kudos to those people for putting on the community line, because it was felt even by folks who kind of found out about it after the fact. But
I just want to point out that the Green Party stands in solidarity with CUPE and CUPW on Canada Post strike issue. We put out a couple of statements urging the government to get back to the bargaining table. And let's not forget that the pause on strike action until May coincides with the election just nicely now, doesn't it? And being that the government is now prorogued, now would be a great time to start up that strike again. Just putting that out there.
That's a good point.
yeah, if you listen to the episode, I go off on Canadian Labour and the NDP. So, kudos to the Green Party here. Folks will be confused because I'm so anti-electoral politics, but I've got Chris on here talking for the Green Party. But we're
a politician.
Yeah. Not everyone's perfect. No, Chris, I'm bugging, but the NDP said nothing, literally nothing. They were worried about the whole Freeland resigning. It all kind of came at the same time, and they took no time. As I say it right in my intro there, I was like, in that moment where, like I said, one of the strongest unions was in the fight for their life, right? Like, are we ever going to negotiate a contract again is what they're thinking. I mean, Sarah says it in the interview, like, I feel like we'll never do it again. And that's what do we have then? Like, what do we have if a 55,000 national union can't negotiate a deal? They can't. 30 years, they have not. Harper, like, conservatives, liberals, it didn't matter. And then when it was time for them to be ordered back to work, which would be like the nail in the coffin, I feel like. It's not, because they're still fighting, but it felt like it. It's a big pivotal moment. Canadian Labour was just like, pew. I don't know where they were. Anybody know where they were? They weren't there. The NDP, they didn't issue a statement. That's supposed to be the Workers' Party. So there's your Greens outflanking them again. But that was disappointing. But we know here on Blueprints of Disruption, it's up to the grassroots, it's up to the rank and file anyway. And the good news is they're doing the work. They're doing the work to build like a feeling of defiance among the rank and file. It's really hard to tell people, I know you've been ordered back to work, but don't go. Everyone's kind of got to put food on the table. They don't understand what the consequences might be. Labor leaders, you don't have that fucking excuse. I'm sorry. I don't give a shit if you're worried about getting arrested or fined. You should have been on that line. That's sad. But the bravery comes from the grassroots always. Another update is from the Thorncliffe Park Tenants. We haven't had them on, but we've talked about them many times, and we've had some of their comrades in Toronto, other tenant unions who work with them on and telling their story. They're at 71, 75, and 79 Thorncliffe Park in Toronto, the east end of Toronto. And like other tenant groups, they are getting really creative in how they are going to disrupt the lives of the people that are ruining theirs. So they are showing up where the boss of the landlord, their landlord's a corporation, which makes it even harder sometimes. And he's speaking at this prestigious event, and they're all in the lobby with drums and megaphones and massive signs that are demonizing them. Other tenant unions, they're postering the neighborhoods of investors, not just landlords, like anybody making a dime off their eviction. They're going to name and shame them. So shout out to the Thorncliffe Park tenants who have been on rent strike. I don't have the data, but it's definitely been over a year. I'm pretty sure they've been on the rent strike for over a year now, and they are fighting above guideline rent increases. And they're not just trying to not pay more rents. These are essentially evictions. The above guideline is so far above the guideline that it's impossible for them to pay. So they would find themselves out on the street and not being able to find something of equal value or equal rent anywhere in the city. So this is a common fight that's happening, but folks can follow them on social media. Again, that's Thorncliffe Park Tenants, and they're a great example to follow in terms of getting a little bit more militant in tenant organizing and really trolling the shit out of their landlords. We told stories about other tenant groups, bringing rats and cockroaches from their apartments to the offices of their landlord, and just really bringing it home to them. So we do love sharing these disruptive updates. I'm going to share one more, and if you folks have any disruptive updates you'd like to share, please. This one's out of Brazil, even though we're normally a little bit more CanCon, but trust me, I'll get there. There's a grassroots group there doing the work of tracking former IDF soldiers, or just like off duty or whatever you call it. I guess you're on leave, or I don't know. I'm not in the military. And back in Brazil. And so they go to investigate them for war crimes, namely destruction. I guess they were a demolition crew bringing down buildings in Gaza and participating in the genocide. As soon as they found out they were under investigation, they fled. Like the rat that they are. And I just thought that was really great news, because the Maple is, I should link, I'm going to drop the link to the Maple article in the comments, but they are tracking people who have gone over and fought for Israel and have come back to Canada to brag about it, because there's no data that's being kept by the government, or there is and they're not sharing it, who knows. But the Maple's taken it upon themselves, so folks know of any that aren't on the list, they can call the Maple and have them added to the list, and we know of quite a few. So this has Canadian implications, because one of the approaches is to hold our own people at least accountable. If we can't do anything about what Israel's doing from that internal perspective, we get the politicians here to stop sending them arms, right? Stop the two-way arms trade with Israel, but also hold anybody here accountable for, at the very least, actual participation in the genocide. But I would argue there's a lot of journalists and politicians that could be up for trial should we ever get there, in terms of looking back and holding people accountable. I wonder if anybody else been to protest this week or seen any kind of disruptive updates that they'd like to share from their neck of the woods.
I don't have any particular to share from my neck here, except obviously, the bringing up the loss of Roger, and just how this is kind of amplified. The only other point in regards to housing I also wanted to mention, which was, a lot of the times people are like, well, there's shelters, they should go to it. There's a lot of things people don't quite understand, and I've talked to a lot of people that are unhoused, and quite a few of them said that no, they'd prefer to live on the street than be in the shelters. And as you start to talk to them, you start to listen to their stories. You start to get the idea that sometimes the shelters are not the most pleasant places because there's a whole bunch of problems, and it's not the fault always the shelter saying it's that they're making places uninhabitable. There's a lot of people that need help in all sorts of different ways. Again, could be addiction, could be mental health, could be anything else, and to try to get as many of these people within these places can sometimes be a challenge that can overwhelm them. And so some of these people will not want to be in there because there's too much going on there. So it's one of those things that we do need to sort of pay more attention to it, and trying to toss this entire thing into the sphere of just, yeah, we're just going to put it into jail. Yeah, that's not going to work. It's just going to be a worse scenario at the end.
Yeah, just another note on the shelter system in Toronto. A lot of the time, yeah, there's rules in the shelters that just do not jive with people's needs, and the conditions there again are just like not conducive to most people's well-being, to be honest. Even if you see pictures of the warming centers, they're in defiance of all the codes that have ever been written to help house people in emergency situations. Like, they just don't give a shit. But also, even once they are in the shelter system, we've done a couple episodes particularly talking about like the Delta Hotel in Toronto. It's actually, well, it's in Scarborough, which is Toronto, but that's how old I am. And that it's like a carceral system. It feels like a prison. There are curfews, there are rules, there's retribution if you don't follow them, and it's a really authoritarian. They're not good conditions. They're not integrated into the community. It's kind of a standalone, and so even when they say that they're housing folks that they've removed from the streets, they're not really. It's often a cycle of going into some of these shelters or these temporary housing and just coming right back out again, by design. So it's in Toronto, they're always adding to the homeless memorial every month. Folks can follow Diana Chan McNally as a really good source of what's going on in Ontario in terms of fighting back, as well as getting updated as what the city is up to. But Chris, anything out in BC that we should be keeping our eyes on, or anything local?
Yeah, actually, I have a few things. So this actually just happened yesterday, getting to what you were saying about the homeless memorial growing all the time. A fellow by the name of Aaron Mooney his body was found outside of Campbell River. I can't remember when it was, but he was last seen between December 17 and December 22nd. RCMP are investigating. It appears to be a suspicious death, but he was homeless, and he, was well liked in the community around Campbell River. So anyone that knows, friends or family of his, I encourage you to reach out to them. Check in on your unhoused friends and family. You never know what can happen, and that's part of the reason why when I talk about folks that are vulnerable, is the fact that they face more violence and risk of death and injury than anyone that encounters them on the street. And it's sad that people are so scared of them, and seek to punish them all the time. They're most at risk for violence, and not just from other folks that they encounter, but from police as well. Let's not kid ourselves. So I just wanted to highlight that because I just read that a few minutes ago. There's an event Friday, January 24th in Cumberland. It's a fundraiser for the unhoused to to purchase, warm gear like, blankets and, gloves and stuff like that for the winter. It's called Punk Beats for the Streets, and it's taking place at the Masonic Lodge in Cumberland. Doors are open at 7 o'clock. Show starts at 8. It's $20 at the door, and it's all ages. And as I mentioned, it's Friday, January 24th. I posted it on my socials if you guys want to check it out. Last thing I want to mention, here on the island, there's been a lot of talk about safe injection sites, and of course, the discussion around shutting those down and opening involuntary care. There's a group of doctors, especially in Nanaimo, that have been opening unsanctioned injection sites to save lives. And they're called the Doctors for Safer Drug Policy. I highly encourage you to follow those folks on all the socials. They're doing lots of great work. They've originally started as a pop-up site, for like a week or so in November, and they've actually expanded their services beyond Nanaimo to, I believe, include Victoria as well. We're talking to a lot of folks in the Comox Valley about safe injection sites and overdose prevention services. I'm part of a group known as the Comox Valley Action Team, or CAT. We meet once a month. We just had our meeting a few days ago, talking about, we met with another group called the, let me just bring up the name here. I meet with a lot of people, so I'm just trying to make sure I get the names right. It was Comox Valley Substance Use Services Collaborative. So we met earlier this week, and then the CAT is meeting at the end of January. So we meet normally online via Zoom, and it's just a group of folks that are advocates, as well as healthcare professionals from like Island Health and from other organizations. There's so much work being done on the ground, but they always need help. We need to engage folks locally, provincially, and federally. Let's not forget the federal context here. And we've been in a public health emergency in BC for almost 9 years. It was declared by the then Health Minister Terry Lake of the then BC Liberal Party in August of 2016, and we've already lost nearly 50,000 people to the toxic drug crisis, and it's not getting any better, regardless of what anyone will tell you about involuntary care and forcing treatment on people. It doesn't work. So we need better solutions. We need all levels of government to be involved, and we need everyone to be on the same page. Care is the first thing that needs to be implemented, not punishment, not forced incarceration. Those things don't help anyone, and it needs to be provided free of charge. We can't be relying on private treatment centers that cost upwards of $10,000 a month in some cases. For example, Edgewood, I attended their outpatient treatment in Vancouver back in 2011 when I needed help. I was very fortunate. I will be blunt. I was very lucky and privileged to have someone in my family, friend circles that introduced me to the then director, who took me on pro bono for a 90-day outpatient treatment program. But even those can cost thousands of dollars, and an in-house treatment program, I think it's 50 days, can cost nearly $40,000. People don't have that kind of money, and we need public interventions to ensure that people get the treatment that they need, that they want, when they want it, and where they live. Rural care is really atrociously underfunded. I live in a semi-rural area. I'm in Courtenay. There's about 40,000 people here. And the closest major city, like Nanaimo, has, I think, 100,000 people, or give or take. I don't know the current census numbers. But the closest major city is Victoria, and that's a 3-hour drive away. Some people don't make it that long. So that's all that I had to talk about. But these things are really, really important, and we need all hands on deck. It takes a village.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Joe, for your updates and for all of your analysis. I hope you guys will join us again for Rabble Rants Live. One of the updates I didn't kind of get into when it comes to the Toronto blockade, because I will unpack it in more detail for an episode of Blueprints of Disruption, is how the police are responding to picket lines. The cops were quick to shut down this community line with threats of arrest. They didn't actually arrest anyone, and there's some learning to do there in terms of what police can do, what they are likely to do, and what you can do to respond. So we're looking to have some legal observers as well as the other members of the community that have been working on this and watching police to see how they behave, because that has changed over the past year. So be sure to subscribe to Blueprints of Disruption wherever you kind of get your podcasts. They do go up here on YouTube, but they're on all the catchers as well. Next week's episode, I teased it a little bit before, but I do that again. It's with an Atlantic group of communists and former anarchist communists. So it's a really actually intriguing conversation on how they envision creating a political community for the same ends that we talk about, namely revolution. Can you say that on YouTube? I don't know. But from perhaps a different approach than you've heard us talking about on the show. And that's all I'll say, because I think I've gone a little anarchist in my approach. But they've kind of reined it in a little bit, and they've got their own way of doing things. So we'll hear from them, because I know there's a lot of people out there, no offense, Chris, but they're looking at the political parties available to them, and none of them truly resonate, or they've gone into these political realms and been really disillusioned with how undemocratic they are, or how welcoming they are of folks that are maybe a little bit farther left on the spectrum. And I don't mean the neurodivergent spectrum, the political spectrum. And so they're like, what do we do now? Do we vote? Who do we vote for? Do we engage in electoral politics or not? And so we kind of answer that question with them. That'll be Tuesday's episode. But yeah, this was fun. I like starting Fridays off at lunch like this, get all riled up, but then we end on good notes, right? There's definitely people around you right now, all around you, fighting all of these systems, all of these issues that we bring up. Trust me, there's a grassroots organization near you that is hitting on this some way. You rarely have to go out and start reinventing the wheel. You don't have to replicate work. So, tune into Blueprints of Disruption to hear from all these organizations, or, Instagram is one of the best, I think, platforms for finding local community groups, mutual aid networks, and stuff like that. But no matter what you do, just get out there and keep on disrupting. So until next Friday, thanks for listening to our Rabble Rants. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent.
Yeah, my pleasure.